lovely faces. Welcome to Sacred Heart if you are a visitor this evening. My name is Caitlin Reindell. Like I said on the Sunday Masses, I moved here about a year and a half ago after serving with Focus, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, for 3 years. 1 year at the University of Illinois, and then 2 years at South Dakota State. And I will introduce our speaker here in a minute, but I figured I'd tell you a short little story about him, the one that kind of sticks in my mind the best. I knew of Kevin Cotter when I was a wee little freshman back at Ball State. I was kind of going into college not really knowing whether I wanted to stay Catholic or even Christian, to be honest. And once I got to the point where I was like, okay, this Christian thing is the real thing, but I don't know about this Catholicism thing. This one Bible study really stuck out to me, and it was called Salvation History. And pretty much what salvation history is it goes through the entire Bible, starting with Adam and Eve, and really ending with us and what the Lord is doing in our lives and how He can work through us, and giving us the gift, most importantly, of His Son. So when I found out, who the major players were writing this Bible study, I became kind of a little fangirl of Kevin Cotter at that point in time. Well, then fast forward again to my first year on staff. So I'm a fresh college grad, and I'm at the University of Illinois, and we get this email saying that there are 6 spots open to go to Rome with Curtis Martin, the founder and president of that, at that point in time at least. And Curtis Martin was invited to go and sit on a synod or like this conference to help the Pope figure out what the new evangelization is. So it's kind of a big deal. He was one of only 2 lay people from the U.S. that got to go. And Curtis invited 100 of his missionaries to go with him. And me, this little, first year, got to go as well. I think I was like the first one to respond, like, yes, please take me. Well, we were in this church, and maybe Kevin can tell you what church it was, but pretty much the way this church works is it's a church built upon a church, built upon a church. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Do you know what story I'm talking about at all? Okay, good. Well, over the years, they built a church upon a church upon a church, and so to really look at this church, you had to go down deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the ground. And so, as you can tell, it's like cold and dingy, and it's super, super, super dark. Well, we're all coming up, and we're almost to the top. And if you know anything about Europeans, they don't have any sense of space like us Americans do. And so they're just pushing through and pushing through. And I get pushed and catch myself on a door frame. And all I see is darkness going down and down and down. And Kevin grabs me by the shirt and pulls me back. And he goes, oh, that could have been real interesting. And I was like, oh my gosh, Kevin Cotter, the person that changed my life 3.5 years ago, just changed my life again, because in my mind, I'm sure it was just roped off, literally roped off. I'm sure it wasn't going to take me down 12 stories. But in my mind it was. I was going plummeting to my death. And so I was very appreciative of him for helping me to see the Lord's plan for my soul, but also for literally saving my life at 22 years old. So without further ado, and so you can listen to the person who actually came to hear talk, I'll introduce Kevin. Kevin serves with Focus as the Senior Director of Curriculum. Previously, Kevin served as an on-campus Focus missionary at Benedictine College. Kevin holds a bachelor's degree in religious studies from Benedictine College and a master's degree in sacred scripture from the Augustine Institute. He is the author of Through the Year with Pope Francis, A Year of Mercy with Pope Francis, and Pope Francis and the Joy of Family. Kevin currently resides in Denver, Colorado, so not too far from us, with his awesome wife, Lisa, who's really cool, and their 3 children. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kevin. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Can you all hear me? Microphone working? Great. I was told there's an Oldsmobile Alero outside with the lights on. So if that's you, we just want to make sure your battery didn't run out. Have you ever sent a text message or an email too quickly and then regretted it? A couple summers ago, I was in my office and I was really busy and had an email come in. And in this email it said, it was from a local family, and they had a house on a mountain. I work in the mountains with Focus, and a nearby mountain they had a home connected to a farm. They said, we're going to be out of town for about a month. We need somebody to look after our farm while we're gone. And I quickly forwarded to my wife. My wife had always had this dream of living on a farm. It's just like this nostalgic idea of living on a farm. And so I forwarded it to her, didn't give it much thought. And 20 minutes later, she gave me a call and she said, congratulations, we're all signed up. We're gonna watch over this house and this farm this summer. I said, well, we hadn't talked about it yet. I'm a bit of a what you call it, indoorsy person. I don't really like being outside. I don't really like taking care of things or taking care of animals. She said, well, we already signed up. We're going over to dinner next week, and they're gonna show us how to take care of this farm. I said, okay, I guess that's what we're gonna do. So that next week, we were all signed up. We went over for dinner, have a great chat, and then we learn how to take care of the farm. And again, I don't have any animals. I don't like being outside, and so we learn how to take care of the dog and the cat. Okay, those are pretty easy. Those aren't hard. Then they had a rat and a lizard. Those were a little different for me, but we figured those out. Then we went outside. There was 5 ducks, 24 chickens, and then we got to the main event: 3 alpacas. Now, I'm not super familiar with alpacas. They're a lot like llamas, except they're a little bit smaller, they're a little bit more skittish, and they have really nice fur. If you try to touch an alpaca, usually they back away and they're like, hey buddy, don't touch the fur. It's really nice. And so the farmer tells us how to take care of the alpacas. So I'm like, okay, this is a bit challenging. I think we can do it, but he gives us one warning. He said there's 1 male alpaca in his pen, and then there's 2 females in their pen. Don't let them come together. I said, okay, got it, 100%. So we started taking care of this farm. For the first few weeks, it's going really well. Everything's, we, in the morning, let all the animals out, feed them, give them water, all that. In the evening, put them away. And as a dad, and if you're going for a few weeks, it's going so well, I think, well, I'm on a farm, shouldn't I be teaching my kids some responsibility, right? They need to learn how to do this on their own. They're 8 and 6, and I had a 1-year-old at the time, 8, 6, and 1 were my kids' ages at the time. And so I said, I'm helping your mom clean up from dinner. Why don't you go ahead down with the animals, start putting them away for the night, and I'll be down in 5 minutes. I thought, what's the worst that could happen? So 5 minutes later, I grabbed my 1-year-old, I don't put shoes on her, and I rush down to the animals, and my kids are putting the chickens away, and I'm thinking, this is great. And I turn the corner, and what do I see? 3 alpacas, all in the same pen. And I know I've got a problem on my hands. And so my daughter, who loves horses, comes around, she goes, oh, Dad, I'll take care of it, no big deal. And so she starts trying to push the alpacas. She's been working with them the last few weeks. And all of a sudden, they're not skittish anymore. The male alpaca, he's the one who got out of his pen. He's not skittish at all. He's very defiant. My daughter falls over, and my other daughter in my arms starts crying. I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And so I think I did what I think any grown man would do. I screamed at the top of my lungs for my wife. So my wife comes down later. She told me she thought someone died or was severely injured, which obviously wasn't the case. And so there I was with my wife, and we sent our kids up to the house. We're quite ready to explain the birds and the alpacas. And so there I am with my bride, and I'm going, what are we going to do? She goes, you're going to separate these alpacas, and you can do it right now. And I said, okay. And so I'm an indoorsy guy, so I started pushing the alpaca, no movement. Take a pitchfork, I started hitting the alpaca, no movement. And my wife's like, you've got to separate these alpacas. And so I don't know what else to do. And so I take my 6-foot, 150-pound frame, and I just run at the male alpaca as fast as I can, and I tackle him. And he gets startled, and my wife grabs him by his harness and puts him back into his cage. And it's probably at this point in time, during the story, you're asking, why is he telling a story about alpacas? Well, I think for many of you, it's pretty easy to tell that I am not a farmer. is pretty clear. I could tell you that I was certified as a farmer. I can tell you that I went to 4-H meetings every week. But it's really clear that I'm not a farmer. You could tell very quickly from observing me that I have no idea what I'm doing. I think for us as Catholics, sometimes we can get baptized, right? We can call ourselves Christians. We can go to meetings each week, like on Sunday. But really, we have to understand, are we really following after Jesus? Are we really embodying, are we really living out the faith? Just as I wasn't living out what it meant to be a farmer, are we really living those things out? Tonight I want to look at 3 characteristics of a disciple. 3 characteristics after someone who's following after Jesus. What does it mean to follow after Jesus? We're going to look at 3 different things. I'll start off with another story for our first one. I want you to imagine that you have a 9-year-old son. I want you to imagine you have a 9-year-old son. And this 9-year-old son over the summer has a friend. And this friend is at your house all the time. He's there in the morning, he's there for lunch, he's there for dinner, he's hanging out with your family, and he begins over the course of summer to love your family. And throughout the summer, he's just loving your family so much, he comes up to you and says, you know, I just love your family so much. I was just wondering if I could be a part of your family. I mean, if I mowed your lawn every week, would you make me a part of your family? You say, of course, and I can't make you, mowing my lawn, and he goes, wait, what if I painted your house too? What if I trimmed the bushes? Can I be a part of your family? And of course, the request is ridiculous, right? You can't just earn your way into someone's family. Becoming a part of someone's family, being adopted into someone's family, is purely a gift. It's purely a gift. And sometimes as Catholics, when we hear, what are the things I need to be a disciple? Or what are the things I need to do to be a Christian? We start to get that kind of Catholic guilt complex. All right, what do I need to do? And the first characteristic, ultimately, of a disciple is someone who accepts God's love. Because there's nothing we can do to earn it. There's nothing we can do to try to get God's love or God's grace into our lives initially. He's the one who gives it. Just as that son was trying to work his way into the family, we can't work our way into God's family. It's ultimately a gift. We have to accept God's love into our life rather than trying to do that. In the 1940s, there was this boy named Jorge who lived in Argentina. And as a young kid, his family was really faithful to the Catholic faith. They went to Mass every Sunday, and they prayed the rosary each day. But Jorge hadn't really experienced God's love. When we got to the age of 16, on September 21st of that year, he had the day off from school. And so Jorge, like most 16-year-olds, he wants to hang out with his friends, right, on the day off. And so he goes to meet up with his friends and his girlfriend, and he's headed off to the train station. And on his way there, he passes his parish church. And as he's passing, he just feels like he's called to go inside of his parish church and pray. So he walks inside and begins to pray. And while he's there, he sees this priest walk by him, down the aisle and into the confessional on the far left. And as he's praying, he says, I just felt like someone grabbed me by the shirt and pulled me into the confessional. And there in the confessional, he begins to confess his sins to this priest who he's never seen in his entire life. And he says during that moment, he began to experience God's mercy in a profound way that he had never experienced before. In that moment, he actually began to understand God's love for him in a way that he never knew, in a way he never experienced before. And for the rest of the day, he didn't go see his girlfriend, he didn't go see his friends. He spent the rest of the day contemplating God's mercy in his life. It was such an impactful experience. He said at age 16, in that moment, he knew that he was called to the priesthood. He didn't tell anybody about the experience. He didn't tell anybody that he felt called to be a priest. But he knew in that moment he was called to be a priest. When he turned 18, he graduated from school. His parents wanted him to be a doctor or a scientist. He said, sorry, I'm actually going to become a priest. He became a priest and then eventually became a bishop. And as a bishop, he returned to that confessional, and his parents parish church. He would kiss the confessional and give it reverence, because that is the moment where he actually understood God's love. Later on, he became a cardinal. And when he became a cardinal, he'd go to Rome occasionally. And each time he'd go to Rome, he'd go to a particular chapel there in Rome. It's kind of off the beaten path. And in that chapel, there is a picture by Caravaggio of the calling of St. Matthew. You see, September 21st was the feast day of St. Matthew. And Jorge always imagined himself like St. Matthew, being that tax collector, being in his sin, that Christ had called him, that Christ had given him his love and given him his mercy, even in the midst of his sin. Not when he got out of his sin, not when he got all this stuff together, but in his sin, Jesus chose St. Matthew. And Jorge felt like that's how Jesus chose him as well. And when this cardinal became Pope, when he became Pope Francis, this moment of mercy, this moment of God's love, became his papal motto. One who was called in mercy is ultimately Pope Francis' papal motto. This moment of mercy became so enshrined in his heart. This moment and this encounter of God's love became so huge. It's with him even to this day as well. My story, in some ways, is a little bit similar to Pope Francis's as well. I don't have this amazing, crazy testimony. I grew up in a Catholic home. I went to Catholic school. I knew right from wrong. I knew to help the poor. But for much of my life, I didn't really necessarily have profound experiences of God's mercy. At the age of 14, I graduated from grade school, and I was going to be off to high school. And that summer, I was involved in a Bible study. And during that Bible study, I don't know what it was, but it began to open up my heart that God was real, that God could work in my life. And later that summer, there's this guy named Scott Anderson who gave a talk. And Scott was like the coolest guy I knew. He was one of my sister's friends, and he was in a band, and he was like definitely the coolest guy who knew like who I was, who knew my name. And Scott gave a talk, and he talked about God's mercy and love for me. He talked about Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, that our Lord gave everything for us. That even if I was the only person in the entire world, that Jesus would have died for me. And in that moment, similar to Pope Francis, I began to really realize what the Lord had done for me. That he actually died for me. And that required a response as well. And I decided to drop everything. I had been involved in sin. I knew that it was getting worse. My friend group wasn't great. I said, Lord, I give you everything, even if that means not being with my friends. Even if that means changing my habits. His love overwhelmed me so much, I was willing to give my life to him. As a speaker, there's no magic way, I think, to present God's love to you. No magic way for me to have a profound experience necessarily of his love. But I do want you to think about it. I do want you to contemplate it. I do want you to take some time in prayer and think about what our Lord has done. But I also want you to do something practical. You all have a sheet of paper, correct? So far I've talked about alpacas and Pope Francis and all sorts of stuff, but I want to do something a little bit concrete. On that sheet of paper, I want you to draw 3 circles. Similar, like medium size. Yeah, that's great. And in each circle, I want you to draw a stick man. You with me so far? This isn't too hard. First circle, cross on the outside. Second circle, cross inside. Third circle, cross somewhere on the man, maybe over his heart. Like I said, very complex. I want to ask two questions as you're looking at this image. The first question, well, let me explain the circles first. So, for each one of these circles, imagine this is your life. The first circle, the faith is outside of your life, right? It doesn't have much involvement in your life. You're not very engaged with the faith. The second circle, Jesus is in your life, right? He's inside the circle. He's one of those things, right? I have school, I have family, maybe I have a sport I play, and then there's Jesus, right? He's involved, he's in my life. There's lots of things in my life as well. The third circle, Jesus is actually at the center of my life. Jesus is at the very center. There might be sports in my life, there might be family in my life, there might be school in my life, work in my life, whatever it might be. But Jesus is ultimately the center of my life. So the two questions I want to ask you are this. The first one is, where would you say you are right now? Which circle do you think describes you? The second question I want to ask is, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be? So where are you right now? Which circle do you find yourself in? But the most important question is, where do you want to be? Where do you want Christ to be at in your life? And that's something, again, that you can take to prayer, something you can think about. But I think that this question is ultimately the most important question. When we talk about this idea of being a disciple for Jesus Christ, anything else that I can tell you, anything else that I can ask you to do or think about, it all begins with our love for Jesus Christ. If not, it's going to be difficult. You've probably heard the phrase,